Imagine moving into your dream home, only to find out your next-door neighbor has been secretly stealing your water for years. That's exactly what happened to me, and when I decided to take revenge, I didn't just stop his water theft. I completely destroyed his entire life. If you've ever had a neighbor who thought your property was their personal playground, smash that like button, subscribe for more insane revenge stories, and get ready, because this one is a roller coaster of petty revenge that turned into poetic justice. When I first stepped into my new house, it felt like a dream come true. I had just purchased it at a price that was almost too good to be true, right in the middle of the capital city. The previous owners were family friends who'd moved abroad years ago and needed cash urgently, so I got the deal of a lifetime. But as I stood there, looking at the half-finished renovations, the peeling paint, and the padlock barely hanging on the front door, I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. This house needed work, but it was mine. What I didn't know back then was that this house also came with something extra. A neighbor from hell. On my very first day, I noticed something strange. There was a random bike parked inside my garage. My house didn't even have a gate, so technically, anyone could just walk right in. I wasn't about to let that be the norm, so I had a new gate installed that same day. By evening, an angry man came banging on my gate. I didn't answer, just watched him from the window as he angrily grabbed his bike and left. I brushed it off as just a weird first day. Little did I know, that was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, I realized people thought my house was still abandoned. Random cars would block my gate, so I put up a "no parking" sign to keep them away. Things started feeling normal again, until last week. I was taking a shower when I noticed something weird. The water pressure had dropped. At first, I thought maybe it was a supply issue from the city, but then I heard a noise that made my blood run cold, the low, mechanical hum of my neighbor's water pump. Now, here's some context. This neighbor, an older man in his 60s, lives in the ground floor of a 3-story house. He rents out the upper 2 floors to tenants. And according to my friends, the previous owners, he hated that the house next door was sold. Apparently, he used to complain constantly when it sat empty, claiming it was an eyesore. So when I noticed that the moment his pump stopped running, my water pressure went back to normal, my stomach twisted. Could it be? Could this man actually be stealing my water? I tested it again. Waited until his pump turned on, turned my taps, pressure dropped. Pump went off, pressure back to normal. It was clear as day. This man had been siphoning water from my property, and suddenly it all clicked. My friends once told me their water bills were mysteriously high even when no one lived here, and they had blamed it on leaks. But now, I knew exactly where that water had been going. I sat on it for a few days, thinking about what to do. Technically, the water bill wasn't huge, just a few dollars a month, but it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. This man had been stealing from me, probably for years, and probably thought he could keep getting away with it. I could confront him, sure. But then what? He'd deny it. Or worse, he'd just find a sneaky way to do it. I could report him, but that would be a hassle. No. I needed a plan, something that would make sure he never even thought about messing with me again. And then it hit me, the perfect plan. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to break anything. All I needed to do was turn off my water at the main supply. See, the way our water system works, a pump fills up the rooftop tank when the water level gets too low. If there's no water coming in, the pump just keeps running, until something burns out. So one night, just as I heard his pump kick on, I slowly walked outside, heart pounding, and twisted the valve, shutting off my water supply completely. And then, I waited. At around 3 in the morning, I heard it, loud voices shouting, confusion. The pump had been running for hours with no water, drawing power nonstop, and eventually it had overloaded the old, outdated wiring in his house. Suddenly, his entire house went dark. Tenants started yelling. They were furious. No water, no power, in the middle of the night. The landlord tried to calm them down, but you could hear the panic in his voice. By morning, things had gone from bad to worse. One tenant immediately decided to move out, saying they couldn't live in a house without basic utilities. Both tenants went to the police to file complaints. And here's the kicker: where I live, landlords are legally required to provide tenants with water and electricity. If they fail, they can be fined on the spot, and fined he was. $500. A massive amount of money for someone who was already barely scraping by. In the following days, I watched the situation unfold like a live-action drama series. His tenants moved out. He had to refund their deposits. And since he couldn't afford to fix the wiring or the pump right away, he couldn't even rent out those floors again. He lost his only source of income. And then came the cherry on top. A few days later, he came to my gate, face stiff, and asked casually, "Did you turn off your water that night?" I just smiled and said, "Oh yeah, I had a leak in my tank, had to turn it off until the plumber came by." The look on his face, priceless. I could tell he knew. But there was nothing he could do. Not legally, not morally. And now, as I speak, he's packing up to move out and live with his daughter because he can't afford to stay here anymore. 2 birds, 1 stone. The sweet satisfaction of watching him lose everything he tried to steal from me, that was the real payoff. He wanted free water. Instead, he lost his house's wiring, his tenants, his income, and ultimately, his independence. All because I twisted a single valve. Some people think they can just take and there won't be consequences. But sometimes, karma doesn't wait. Sometimes, it just needs a little nudge from someone who's had enough. If this story made you smile, hit that like button and tell me in the comments, what would you have done if your neighbor was stealing your water? And of course, subscribe for more of the most satisfying revenge stories on the internet.